In this bamboo rod building video, we're going to focus on the final planing steps in rod taper. Now we're back to the planing forms. I'll do a planing down to a particular spec that's just above the final spec. I'll remove the enamel at that point, reset the forms to the final spec, plane them down. The rod starts at its thickest point and gets narrower, narrower, narrower until you get to the finest point down at the tip. That graph of going from its thickest to its thinnest point is the rod taper. In rod building, rod taper is everything almost. You're building the chassis here for your rod. This is going to affect the stiffness, the handling, the flexibility of your rod. There's a standard typical method in measuring creating tapers is to measure it at 5-inch intervals. So this planing form has its adjustments or stations every 5 inches, and that's where I take those measurements, and that's how I set the planing form. Probably the most critical tool in rod building. There are lots of classic proven rod tapers. That's what most rod builders base their tapers off of. But there's software, mathematical formulas to figure out rod tapers and how it's going to affect casting and the action of your rods. This step will take quite a while. We've got 18 strips of heat-treated cane, which is much tougher to plane now. It's been hardened. We'll start planing. I've gone through all 6 bamboo strips for the butt section with my initial taper planing. I'm now going to scrape off the outer enamel layer. So a little recap, I believe I touched upon this in previous episodes. Similar to woods where you would have a bark and grains underneath, bamboo is technically a grass, so you have an enamel protective layer, which would be like the bark, and you have power fibers inside, which would be similar to the grain. The power fibers are what make these rods strong. The strongest power fibers are just below the enamel layer. Getting close to the final spec now, and we're measuring to the 1,000th of an inch. So I need to remove the enamel layer to get this side completely flat now, so that all sides will be completely flat, forming my equilateral triangles of each strip. So strips in the form, it's elevated above the surface a little bit. I've got a plane, I have a scraper plane. Just start scraping that outer enamel layer off. I've scraped the enamel from all 6 butt strip sections. I'll now set the planing form to the final specs and plane down to the final taper spec. I don't want to take huge shavings right now because we are at the final spec and there's no turning back, so very fine shavings. These shavings are probably just a few thousandths of an inch thick. And they're all coming off in nice long strands, which is proof of a good sharp plane blade. I've completed the final tapering on the butt section. If you recall, we started with the raw bamboo culm, and about 90% of this bamboo goes into the recycling or kindling or whatever project you end up using it for. Buckets. Nice shavings. And loosely fitted, you can see the hex rod formation that bamboo rods are known for. So, just a little bit of cleaning up on here, and this one will be ready to glue up a blank. I'm going to go through the same process with the tip sections, and that'll complete the final planing. And we're still on our way.